As we see Donald Trump and other world leaders attempt to broker peace in the Gaza-Israel conflict, many forget that the roots of this struggle run far deeper than modern politics. The ongoing Israeli-Palestinian deadlock isn't just a clash of ideologies, it's the product of a century of forgotten doctrines, failed treaties, and lost chances that silently shape today's chaos. From the 1923 Iron Wall ideology to Trump's deal of the century, every missed opportunity built the fragile reality we now call the peace process. In this video, we reveal 10 forgotten factors that rewrote history and explain why true peace was never just about borders, but about the ghosts of decisions long buried. At number 1, we have the secret history of the Iron Wall. Hidden beneath the political surface of modern Israeli strategy lies a powerful and controversial ideology, the Iron Wall Doctrine. Conceived in 1923 by Zionist leader Zev Jabotinsky, this philosophy argued that peace could never be achieved through negotiation or coexistence, but only through unassailable military strength. Jabotinsky's premise was chillingly pragmatic. He believed the native Arab population of Palestine would never voluntarily accept Jewish statehood, so Israel's survival required overwhelming force and unbreakable control. Over the decades, this belief evolved into the bedrock of Israel's defense and foreign policy, an invisible wall of deterrence maintained through occupation, settlements, and technological dominance. While originally presented as a strategy for peace, it paradoxically institutionalized perpetual conflict, keeping reconciliation perpetually out of reach. Even in historic diplomatic windows from Camp David to the Taba Summit, this doctrine shaped decision-making, convincing Israeli leaders that security must precede peace, not coexist with it. The enduring legacy of the Iron Wall is a psychological and political paradox. In seeking absolute safety, Israel created a cycle where power overshadows diplomacy, ensuring the peace process remains a battlefield of control rather than coexistence. This hidden ideology continues to shape regional politics, influencing even Donald Trump's deal of the century, which echoed the Iron Wall's central theme, peace built on dominance, not equality. At number 2, we discover the forgotten proposal, when Jerusalem almost became an international city. Before Jerusalem became the epicenter of an unending territorial struggle, the world once envisioned it as a city without borders, a neutral sanctuary governed by all and owned by none. In 1947, the United Nations passed Resolution 181, a landmark decision proposing the partition of Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, while assigning Jerusalem a special international status known as Corpus Separatum. This plan would have transformed the Holy City into a globally administered territory, preserving its spiritual sanctity and preventing any one side from claiming exclusive sovereignty. It was a visionary attempt to prevent the bloodshed that would soon engulf the region. Yet, as war erupted in 1948, this ambitious idea collapsed before it could take shape, and Jerusalem became a symbol of division rather than unity. Israel and Jordan split the city, establishing a precedent that sovereignty would be decided by force, not diplomacy. The dream of an international Jerusalem faded from political memory, replaced by decades of zero-sum competition. Even modern peace initiatives, including Donald Trump's controversial recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, were haunted by the ghost of this forgotten compromise. Had the Corpus Separatum survived, it might have neutralized one of the most explosive issues in Middle Eastern politics, perhaps paving the way for a genuine peace that balanced faith, identity, and coexistence. Instead, the Holy City became the ultimate prize in an endless struggle for legitimacy and power. At number 3, we unearth the ghost of Gaza, the vanished all-Palestine government of 1948. Long before Hamas, the Gaza Strip briefly hosted what could have been the first independent Palestinian government, a fleeting experiment erased from history books. In the aftermath of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Palestinian leaders assembled in Gaza under Egyptian protection to proclaim the all-Palestine government. They adopted the historic Arab Revolt flag, declared Jerusalem their capital, and issued thousands of passports, signaling a bold attempt at sovereignty. Officially recognized by the Arab League, the APG appeared poised to represent Palestinian aspirations for nationhood. Yet behind the symbolism lay a hollow reality. The new government had no army, no treasury, and no control over territory. Caught in the geopolitical rivalry between Egypt and Transjordan, it was quickly rendered powerless, a pawn in a larger Arab chess game. By late 1948, the APG had been exiled to Cairo, surviving only on Egyptian funds and UN RWA aid. This early political failure marked Gaza as a dependent enclave, setting the stage for decades of external control and humanitarian crises. The dream of self-rule dissolved into decades of isolation, occupation, and rebellion. Today, Gaza's persistent instability, from economic collapse to political fragmentation, echoes the tragedy of the all-Palestine government's collapse. When Donald Trump later unveiled his peace plan promising prosperity for Gaza, he was inadvertently confronting the long shadow of this forgotten government, the first and most tragic reminder that Palestinian independence has always been born in exile, not in freedom. At number 4, we reveal the Green Line ghost, when a ceasefire became the world's peace template. Few realize that the famous Green Line, drawn hastily in green ink after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, was never meant to become a permanent border. Yet today, it defines nearly every international peace proposal, including Donald Trump's own. Officially established under the 1949 Armistice Agreements, the Green Line separated pre-1967 Israel from the territories it later captured: the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. But beneath this seemingly legal demarcation lies a secret history of manipulation, power imbalance, and quiet military maneuvering. As Iraq withdrew its troops and handed positions to Jordan's smaller army, Israel seized the opportunity to conduct Operation Shin Tav Shin, redrawing parts of the map through force and diplomacy. In one covert deal, sections of the line were literally redrawn in blue ink, an understated deception that shifted the boundary to Israel's strategic advantage. This episode set a lasting precedent that military gains could be quietly transformed into political facts. Today, Israeli policymakers still invoke this precedent to justify minor border adjustments, arguing that the Green Line is not sacred, but flexible. Ironically, what began as an improvised ceasefire sketch evolved into the world's baseline for peace, a fragile line built not on consensus, but on the ghosts of wartime opportunism. The Green Line's murky origin story exposes a haunting truth. Every modern peace initiative, including Trump's deal of the century, still negotiates with a phantom boundary, one drawn in haste, contested in war, and sanctified in diplomacy. Number 5, we uncover the Jordan option, when Amman walked away from the West Bank. For decades after 1967, there existed a quiet, diplomatic alternative to direct Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, the so-called Jordan option. After the Six-Day War, Jordan continued to claim sovereignty over the West Bank, offering the world a potential compromise, a confederation in which Palestinians could achieve autonomy under Amman's rule rather than total independence. But in 1988, amid the growing violence of the First Intifada, King Hussein of Jordan made a stunning and irreversible decision. He renounced all legal and administrative claims to the West Bank. This single act, delivered in a solemn televised address, transformed the political landscape overnight. Jordan's disengagement dissolved the only regional framework that had once buffered the Palestinian struggle, thrusting the Palestine Liberation Organization into full direct confrontation with Israel. Suddenly, the PLO was recognized as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, a diplomatic victory that also came with crushing responsibility. The move forced Israel, and later peace brokers like Donald Trump, to deal exclusively with Palestinian leadership fractured by occupation and economic collapse. This forgotten turning point laid the groundwork for the Oslo Accords, but simultaneously doomed them by removing a powerful Arab mediator. Jordan's renunciation closed one political chapter but opened another defined by division, vulnerability, and unilateral negotiation, a legacy still shaping every peace initiative today. Number 6, we expose the other intifada, how economic dependency fueled rebellion. While history remembers the First Intifada, 1987 to 1991, as a spontaneous uprising against Israeli occupation, its roots were buried deep in economic engineering and resource domination. After 1967, Israel systematically integrated the occupied territories into its economy, connecting Palestinian water, electricity, and trade systems directly to Israeli control. What seemed like modernization was, in reality, a strategic web of dependency. By the mid-1980s, nearly 90% of Palestinian imports came from Israel, and tens of thousands of Palestinians were economically bound to Israeli employers. The occupation had quietly transformed into an economic stranglehold. When Palestinians resisted, Israel retaliated not only with soldiers but with sanctions, sealing borders, seizing property, banning exports, and paralyzing agriculture. Beneath this, a deeper crisis brewed. Water. Access to aquifers, particularly in Gaza and the West Bank, was rationed along discriminatory lines, leaving entire communities parched while nearby settlements thrived. As the coastal aquifer in Gaza became increasingly salinated and undrinkable, rage turned into revolt. The First Intifada, therefore, was not merely a cry for political freedom, but a rebellion against systematic deprivation, against an occupation that weaponized economics and water. This invisible layer of control, still present in modern times, reveals why every peace plan from Oslo to Trump's struggles to deliver stability. Because true peace cannot exist while one side controls the other's survival itself. At number 7, we examine the settlements factor, how land acquisition sabotaged peace treaties in real time. One of the most decisive yet often ignored forces behind the repeated collapse of peace efforts is the relentless expansion of Israeli settlements. These civilian enclaves, built on occupied land seized after 1967, have become both the physical and psychological embodiment of permanent control. International law, reaffirmed by the International Court of Justice, categorizes these settlements as illegal, demanding an immediate halt to construction and the evacuation of settlers. Yet expansion has continued for decades, even during active peace negotiations such as the Oslo Accords. Each new settlement, road, and barrier carves up Palestinian territory, slicing the West Bank into disconnected enclaves that make a contiguous Palestinian state impossible. The irony is staggering. While diplomats drafted maps envisioning coexistence, bulldozers on the ground redrew reality in cement and steel. The network of Jewish-only bypass roads and military-protected zones effectively sabotaged treaties in real time, turning land for peace into an illusion. The expansion not only displaced thousands of Palestinians, but entrenched a mindset within Israeli politics that territorial compromise equals existential risk. The world's failure to enforce accountability turned settlement growth into the ultimate veto over diplomacy. Even Donald Trump's deal of the century reflected this shift, legitimizing many settlements as permanent Israeli territory, a move that buried the two-state dream beneath layers of concrete and political defiance. At number 8, we revisit the collapse of Taba, the forgotten summit that almost succeeded. The Taba Summit of January 2001 stands as one of history's greatest what-ifs. A near-miss moment when peace between Israelis and Palestinians was not just imagined, but nearly achieved. Following the bitter collapse of Camp David 2000 and amidst the eruption of the Second Intifada, negotiators from both sides met in Egypt to make one last attempt to bridge decades of division. For the first time, they reached near consensus on every major issue: borders, Jerusalem, refugees, and security. The draft agreements, summarized in the Moratinos non-paper, revealed striking compromises. Both sides accepted the 1967 borders as a baseline. Jerusalem was to be shared, with each side governing its own neighborhoods, and Gaza would be fully under Palestinian sovereignty, with Israeli settlements withdrawn. The atmosphere was tense, but hopeful diplomats described it as the closest the two nations had ever come to a final peace. Yet, politics killed what diplomacy had built. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak had already resigned, and elections loomed. When hardliner Ariel Sharon won in February 2001, the fragile progress died overnight. Taba's failure wasn't ideological, it was electoral. In the aftermath, violence escalated, trust evaporated, and the roadmap was buried beneath rising extremism. To this day, Taba remains a haunting blueprint of what could have been the peace that slipped away, not for lack of agreement, but for lack of time. At number 9, we reveal the Saudi surprise how the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative was ignored. In the early 2000s, as the Middle East reeled from the Second Intifada and the shockwaves of 9/11, an extraordinary diplomatic breakthrough quietly emerged, one that could have ended the Arab-Israeli conflict for good. The Arab Peace Initiative, spearheaded by Saudi Arabia and endorsed unanimously by all 22 Arab League members, offered Israel full normalization, peace, recognition, and security guarantees, in exchange for a complete withdrawal from territories occupied since 1967 and a fair resolution to the Palestinian refugee crisis. It was the first time the entire Arab world extended an open hand toward Israel, promising an end to decades of hostility. Yet, the Israeli government under Ariel Sharon dismissed the proposal almost immediately, labeling it a non-starter. The sticking point was territorial. The demand to return to the pre-1967 borders was viewed as an existential threat rather than an opportunity for legitimacy. By rejecting the API, Israel forfeited a historic chance to achieve collective peace and instead doubled down on unilateralism. This decision reshaped the regional order, signaling that normalization would occur not through a comprehensive deal, but through selective alliances. 2 decades later, Trump's Abraham Accords reflected this shift: peace without Palestine, normalization without justice. The Arab Peace Initiative remains one of the most tragically ignored offers in modern diplomacy, a moment when the region was ready for peace, but Israel was not. At number 10, we conclude the Trump Doctrine, the forgotten prerequisites of the deal of the century. Donald Trump's Middle East strategy will be remembered for 2 contradictory outcomes: the historic Abraham Accords and the doomed deal of the century. While the former normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations, the latter was intended to finally resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Yet, buried within the fine print of Trump's peace plan were conditions that made statehood for Palestinians practically impossible. The proposed Palestinian state was to be entirely demilitarized, with Israel maintaining total control over airspace, borders, and even electromagnetic communication frequencies. Hamas and all armed groups were to disarm permanently, while Palestine would be barred from joining the United Nations or pursuing legal action against Israel in the ICC or ICJ without Israeli approval. What Trump presented as realistic peace was in essence a rebranded occupation, a state in form, not in function. The plan promised billions in economic aid, but no sovereignty, no control over territory, and no genuine independence. By embedding Israel's security dominance into the very architecture of the deal, Trump unknowingly revived Jabotinsky's century-old Iron Wall philosophy: peace through permanent asymmetry. For Palestinians, it was not a peace offer but a surrender document. The deal of the century thus became the final link in a century-long chain of failed solutions, proof that peace cannot exist where equality is denied and freedom is conditional. The Gaza-Israel conflict we see today is not just a product of modern politics. It's the result of a century of lost opportunities, broken promises, and power-driven agendas. From the Iron Wall Doctrine to the collapse of the Taba Summit and the hollow promises of the Abraham Accords, every turning point proved that force was chosen over peace and control over coexistence. Yet, hope still lies in learning from these forgotten factors by confronting the past with honesty and rebuilding on the foundation of true, equal sovereignty. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep historical analyses and hidden truths behind world conflicts. Thanks for watching.